Hello, Yang Gang. My name is Kyle Hendon, host of the Step Forward podcast and communications director for Humanity Forward Arizona. I'm very excited to introduce our very own Ray Alonzo as executive producer for the show and to sit down with James Ellars, who launched a congressional campaign in California's 8th under the Humanity First banner. There is an overwhelming amount of news I'd like to talk about this week, so I'll have to try to weave some of it in conversation with James, but I will talk about some recent news pieces from the Humanity First movement and Humanity Forward National, and a couple pieces of local news I'd like to highlight. Reported by AZ Central's Maria Poyeta, Governor Doug Ducey announced that salons and barbershops can reopen May 8th, while restaurants can start dine-in services May 11th. While there are precautions in place for reopening, solely product sales for salons and social distancing criteria for restaurants, the Arizona community met this news with a mixed reaction. Concerns for public health are prominent, while vigorous right Republican Senator Michelle Aginta-Rita thought Ducey's plan didn't go far enough. Brendan Carpenter, president of Humanity Forward Arizona, responded to our governor's decision by saying, "The case to reopen Arizona's economy, even partially, has not been fully made. The data does not show conclusively that a second wave of the COVID cases will be prevented in Arizona. This being the case, Governor Ducey should exercise more caution. At the same time, I appreciate what Representative Townsend and Senator Aginta-Rita have said in defense of small business owners in Arizona. I recommend they help move forward legislation that will release additional relief funding as a stopgap while we wait for the data needed to reopen the state safely for business. It's clear that whatever course we should choose, social distancing measures and infection tracking should continue for the foreseeable future to prevent tragedy for Arizona families." In other news, prominent Arizona universities like Arizona State, University of Arizona, and Northern Arizona University have decided they will go ahead and offer on-campus classes for fall semester by 2020. Reported by Fox 10's Jonathan J. Cooper, all three universities will be allowing cases to continue on campus, while the details given to students, parents, and the press were limited. As a college student at ASU right now, I am concerned in the way ASU has handled this crisis. In a time where universities are modeled as cash generators for college administration, their profit motive is to return people to class, or at the very least, tell prospective and returning students that courses will resume on course until the checks have cashed and deposits have been dropped, and then pull the rug out from under us and move us back towards online-only classes. Humanity Forward Arizona would like these universities to greatly expand on how they keep their students safe on some of the largest campuses worldwide, or at the very least detail how they know the pandemic will be less in come August. Moving into Humanity First Movement news, the interim board of Humanity Forward Movement had their first official meeting with Andrew Yang directly. HFAZ president and interim board member Brendan Carpenter noted that this meeting went better than I thought possible. Let's go over the highlights. Andrew was asked about long versus short-term goals of Humanity First Movement and where our efforts will be most effective. He laid out 4 priorities. The first one is to help activate volunteers for candidates Humanity Forward has endorsed. People like Jermaine Johnson, South Carolina 80, David Kim, California 34, or Heidi Brones, Oregon 1. More endorsements are under consideration and volunteers are needed to help these people get elected. The second one is we need to start building our political capital locally and support national initiatives swaying politicians to support our missions, UBI, data rights, and human-centered capitalism. The third one is any support the Yang Gang can lend to projects outside the Humanity First movement will only help increase our legitimacy socially and politically. This includes the All Americans Project, the PPE, and the Humanity Forward COVID Relief Fund. Lastly is to keep the Yang Gang growing online. The importance of our online power will only increase during these times as automation displaces more and more jobs in the coming years and people are pushed online. Andrew also commented on how HFM should maintain the support of the 42% of Yang Gang that will not support Vice President Biden, advising that Democratic Yang Gang do not voter shame Trump supporters. We should be all able to maintain the friendships that we forged during the campaign. Those who choose to vote for President Trump, we will continue welcoming you in our movement. The HFM have made great strides dividing the nation into separate regions. The South region had its initial meeting May 1st, where leaders from Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada began to foster relations between each other. For states without leads of the HFM movement, reach out to us here and we will connect you to the national channel. Leaders of HFM are crafting our guide to growth in a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy-like memorandum of how we will achieve the goal of growing the Yang Gang by 10 times by 2024. Hopefully in an event to bolster Andrew's second run for president. We hope to deliver more Humanity Forward, national, and local news in our conversation with James Ellars. He ran in the Democratic primary in 2020 for California's 8th congressional district on Andrew's Humanity First platform. He is here to discuss recent activism in the Yang Gang and to give perspective on our political ventures. Thank you for stepping forward, James.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Super excited to be here.
Before we get in your conversation, I'd like to let Ray introduce himself real quick. He's our EP for the show.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Ray Alonzo. I'm kind of the EP and producer of this show, and also heading up the digital sphere of Humanity Forward Arizona, and just making sure everything's good with the online presence.
We all thank you for that, Ray. So, James, just a classic Yang Gang question. Where did you get yanked?
I think you and I talked about this on the Yang Gang Hang, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was working in, I'm originally from California. We spent a couple of years jumping around the country, and I was actually working at Disney World in Animal Kingdom. And we were just hanging out, talking to guests, helping people out. And the conversation just went the normal way that I think most Yang introductions go. Like, hey, are you following the presidential election? Went over that a little bit. Hey, have you heard of Andrew Yang? And again, it was just like the guy who wants to give everybody $1,000 a month. Long story short, he had me listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, and once I listened to that podcast, I mean, I was on board immediately.
Yeah, I think I got hooked with the Joe Rogan podcast too. I was just out of an operation. It's basically just laying down for 4 weeks, just binge everything Yang said. It was pretty thorough indoctrination from the beginning.
Seriously, and it's something where, I mean, the long form. I appreciate the long form podcasts so much because we can get like an actual in-depth look at these candidates, which makes a lot of these debates so frustrating. But yeah, once you listen to him a while, I mean, he knows his stuff, he knows his policies, and you can tell that he's genuinely trying to work to help people's lives. And that's one of the big reasons I want to jump on board, because I feel like that's a huge part that's missing in the political arena right now.
I think these podcasts will be essential for the growth of the Yang Gang throughout until we get to 2024. Kind of one of our major reasons Humanity Forward Arizona is pushing it so far or so hard in the beginning is that we think it can be a very easy way to maintain communications from leadership to the grassroots. Now, did you kind of encounter any of these roadblocks communicating with upper leadership of Andrew's campaign when you were running, or do you think that wasn't as big as a problem as people might think?
So, being a candidate, I didn't really have any communication. That's one thing that was I felt was a drawback of running for office at the same time as being super excited about another campaign, because as a candidate for Congress, I couldn't really communicate with Andrew Yang's campaign in terms of coordination or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like any of the super PACs, like the original Humanity Forward. So I saw all you guys doing everything, which is awesome, like going out to Iowa and doing all these things, and I really, really wanted to do that. But when it came down to it, like I had to, make sure I do my job in my own district. And so honestly, to your question, like, I don't know, because at the time I wasn't able to communicate just due to campaign laws and things like that. But from what I heard, I mean, other people, the communication was there for sure.
Have you had any contact now that you're not a candidate?
So there are a couple other projects we're working on right now, and literally before I jumped on this recording, we got confirmation that we'll be myself, Heidi with Yang Vets, are going to be able to interview and talk to Andrew Yang within the next couple of weeks. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. So we'll have direct communication that way, and also a lot of the different organizations are trying to work together as much as possible. One thing we're planning on doing is an organization for political purposes, similar to what Andrew's doing, but on more of a local level and more of a grassroots level, where not more of a grassroots level, but kind of just if we want to say, hey, let's go throw up some digital billboards, you know what I mean? Like, we'll be able to do it through this other organization. Or if, hey, we want to trend some things like I don't know if you guys saw the Yang Saves Democracy yesterday.
Yes.
That was on a whim from us yesterday. Just like, hey, should we trend this? Like, sure. So we're working on a lot of things to be a lot more nimble. But the hope going forward is more communication, like you asked.
Yeah. It's very refreshing to see that we still have our power online. And as I said in the Step Forward report, Andrew met with the Humanity First Movement's interim board, I want to say on Saturday or Sunday, and one of the main directives he acts of the grassroots is to keep our power online, because that will become more and more important as more people are pushed away from social interactions, as more jobs are lost, and online spaces will become even more potent as time prolongs. And you were pretty heavily involved with the Congress passed UBI trend, right?
Yeah, that's actually the Forward United group where it originated, and where it was literally just a random. It started as a random Yang Gang hang with like 15 of us. By the end of the hang on Zoom, we were making projects, and we came up with the idea for the Congress Pass UBI thing. And then from there, we got it rolling, and it eventually got to number 2. The only reason it wasn't number 1 a couple Fridays ago was because that whole Lysol thing was trending. Otherwise, it would have easily been number 1 with over 70,000 tweets. We got over 10,000 people in the petitions, and that was the point where we're like, dang, we need to like organize this and harness it like just to make sure we still have our presence. So that's where we're building Forward United. That'll be the organization. And again, it's just filling the gaps where we feel like we need it, right? Because you have Humanity Forward doing their thing. They're doing amazing things. We have the Humanity First movement. You guys are doing amazing things. And I was in on a lot of those like I was on the Slack. I was on the live streams, like watching. I was like, okay, they got this handled. So then, we're trying to fill in the gap. So the trends, the online presence, that's just a small part of it. There's a lot of other kind of crazy Yang Gang ideas that might come out pretty soon. But yeah, I think we're seeing a resurgence of our online presence for sure.
So what are the major hubs that you go to get something trending in the Yang Gang? Like, who do you need to talk to? Because I'd love to talk to those people.
Yeah, I mean, it's so running for Congress, my account got a decent amount of following. The blue check mark also helps. But like myself, Heidi Yang Vets, if you've seen John, he has like the teenager Andrew Yang on his Twitter profile. The Humanity First movement does a lot. Eddie and Eric with them, they do a ton. So it's really like, again, like Erica out in LA, Fred, Truckers for Yang. I mean, pretty much a lot of the main, not main, but the
Twitter famous.
Yeah, one of the more well-known people we just have in that group, and we're just like, hey, let's do this, and everybody jumped on board, and it was really refreshing because you have some hesitation, like, damn, we've been out of it for a couple months, you know what I mean? Like, hopefully we could still make an impact like we used to. And I think
you guys definitely succeeded. I remember getting the call like 1 a.m. that night that we were doing this huge push in the morning, and I activated our comms team, and we were able to participate in it. Got a lot of traction. It was very helpful, and Andrew was telling the board a little bit about what actual progress we made. And he said thousands of emails and letters and faxes. They still use faxes. That's amazing. Were sent to our representatives. And I was like, wow, that feels good that we get these transcends to in-person interaction.
Yeah, and I think it was also a temperature check to see how our organizations are doing in terms of like, hey, if we need to do something, massive, can we get it done? Because we were originally planning on doing that trend 2 weeks out further.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like now or something, right?
Yeah, it was supposed to be around now, this time, but we got some information about them might be they might be moving up the talks on emergency UBI and emergency payments. So we're like, okay, let's do it tomorrow. And so again, it's just like, okay, can we do what we used to do and make a huge impact in a super short amount of time? And I think it was a very, very good temperature check as to where the Yang Gang is, where our organizations are, and just a small taste of what we can do moving forward. Because that was literally the next day, like, hey, let's trend this.
I have a background in organizational leadership, and one of one of the things I really pressed on Arizona when we were forming our own nonprofit is that I genuinely believe the Yang Gang will come back if our leader starts pushing us forward a little bit more, and
Yeah.
they're ready to be reactivated, just waiting for action items. And I think this was a great taste to see how well that, or how many people are still activated within our grassroots. So it was really nice that you guys were able to put that together.
Yeah. We thank you everybody that participated for sure. And it's such an important time right now. Like with everything going on, the importance of UBI. No, I don't think any of us imagined how quickly the need for UBI would be a reality. You know what I mean? Like Andrew Yang drops out, and 2 or 3 months later, it's like one of the main policies that we need to be implementing and is being talked about. So this is something where, especially in the coming weeks, like it's so urgent to get them to implement UBI in the form that Andrew was proposing it, because there's a lot of different plans jumping around. I think,
to be clear, we're talking about those 2,000 grand a month during the crisis right now, right?
Correct. So there's a lot of different plans being thrown around. A lot of them are even trying to take out the name UBI, which we are pushing back on. There are some groups that are kind of, they were going along with the, like, oh, Rashida Tlaib wants us to not say UBI. Like, no, we're not going to go along with that. Like, we want UBI to be in the conversation. We want it to be normalized so that everything that's attached to it, you know, the universality of it, the no means testing, like all the aspects of it go along with it, not just some other form. So it's something where we're going to need more of a push. Right now, we're still kind of trying to see what Washington's doing and then where to pivot and go from there. But we're going to need a huge push around this very soon.
I have a few more questions about our political activism movements, but I'd like to round off our conversation about the Humanity First movement meeting with Andrew. One of the biggest things that he said that when I listened is they're going to start looking at investing into Yang Gang communities. He didn't. To be clear, it's not a promise of anything substantial or anything too heavy. We need to keep our expectations checked. But what sort of investments would you like to see Humanity Forward make in our local communities, in terms of our local Yang Gang communities?
That is a good question. In the states, first thing that comes to mind, in the states that do caucuses, some infrastructure like our own caucus reporting app and training for caucuses. Not like, because if you look what happened, like we still don't really know what in the holy hell happened in Iowa. Like it was just such a cluster that we don't even know. So take that, say, okay, we need infrastructure around, you know, what's going to happen next time, because we will run into more states with caucuses. So we need our own caucus app. We need our own infrastructure around that. And then it's just going to be, you know, building our own infrastructure locally, right? Like if you're in Arizona, getting local voter information into a database and then start reaching out to people and seeing exactly where the temperature is of your local area. That's one thing with running for Congress out here. It wasn't like Yang Gang is really good at talking about universal basic income on a national level, but we need to get better at talking about it on a local level. So for example, in District 8 in California, where I am, there's not exactly enough revenue to generate money with a VAT, if that was, you know, if we were to implement it on a local level. So out here, we would need something more like a land use tax to be able to generate money to put into a UBI. So I challenge Yang Gang to like check out what your local area is like and how these kind of policies would apply locally and how you could do that locally. A really, really good resource for that is the Stanford Basic Income Lab. So you can literally just Google Stanford Basic Income Lab. They're putting together like all the research and studies and case studies about universal basic income, and they have a lot of good guides about implementing UBI on a local level. And that's something where a lot of these policies, a lot of policies that get passed nationally are passed locally first. Like
Mhm.
the more policies are passed locally, the easier it is to pass nationally. So I challenged Yang Gang just to take a look at these policies and see what we can do to pass them locally. That's one of the biggest things I feel with building a community is just a, I don't know, like for each community they need their own understanding of your local area and then what you need from there. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, like for all the Arizonas watching, our policy team is currently developing our proposal. Well, what we'd want to do with UBI in Arizona. But I think it's also important to connect. We need to connect to our communities individually in a way we can't do nationally. For example, we're we're heavily considering adding a water rights humanity first platform
yeah,
to our movement so we can tap into something that's more that Arizonans care about more or disproportionately in terms to the rest of the nation. I think we can really fill the gaps in the local policies where they just need a little bit more extra firepower to help push it over the edge. What's something in California that you think would have that similar impact to your community?
I mean, you hit it spot on with water rights.
Mm.
Honestly, like specifically, I mean, California as a whole, like for example, LA just pulls water from all these different areas. Like Mammoth is giving water to LA. I'm in the
Really?
desert. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people angry in Mammoth about that, which it's completely understandable. Out here, I really think a value added tax for California as a whole would be very valuable because if you look at the inequality in terms of a state, I think California has 40% of the nation's homeless population.
Hmm.
But if you look at California as an economy in itself, it's in like what the top 5 in the world. So there's a lot of things that I feel like maybe not a full UBI of 1,000 a month, maybe a smaller UBI, but there has to be things that we can do locally and on the state level to move the policies forward because especially in like California generates enough money, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you look at Apple, Google, Facebook, like the companies that are in California and the monies that's being generated is pretty staggering. And to look at what California generates in terms of, you know, an economy, and then you look at the inequality, it's, you know, it's kind of crazy that it's that far off. So I think a state level VAT. I think. I mean, housing is another one, man. Like
Yeah,
housing
that was
as
on
a
your website
whole.
as a big one.
Yeah, like housing is so it's getting out of hand. Like to the point where I understand when people don't aren't really for universal housing in terms of like a 2-bedroom house. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
there has to be more we could do in terms of like 3D printing concrete houses, like so people actually have a home because it's getting to the point where people just can't afford houses, so they're living on the street. Like I was driving in downtown Victorville today, and there's just tents lined up in certain areas. You know, and these are things that people just turn a blind eye to. And that's one reason I think why Yang Gang's so passionate about UBI because UBI would not solve, but vastly help a lot of these
It's
problems.
hard to imagine it wouldn't help.
Well, no, exactly. Like I'm not saying it would solve all the problems. It's not a one, you know, one solution fixes everything, you know, policy. But when you look at everything that that is going the wrong way, like UBI would help a ton of it. So again, my issue on the local level was, you know, getting people to understand it locally. Um, and that's where I think we could make some moves and get more things implemented locally.
To have a little critical thinking about our policy, there's this kind of general conception that UBI is a floor, so we can argue the policy in a lot of different areas like healthcare or housing or sorry, or like food management, stuff like that. But what do you think? Is there an area where UBI really doesn't help that you think we need to stop, like address more directly with another proposal? Or
Give me an example Because I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Do you have anything?
I was thinking of immigration would be the biggest one. I think our weakness in the Hispanic community was very apparent, especially in Arizona, us being kind of on the front lines, and you in California. And a lot of our policy excludes immigrants that aren't citizens, because obviously you don't get a check if you're not a citizen. And it also takes away some means tested protection we have for our immigrant communities here in Arizona. So I found it a little bit tougher to argue the UBI point to Hispanic communities that UBI wouldn't actually help that much, or wouldn't help everyone in that community.
Right. It's a little tougher discussing it. That's a discussion where you have to talk about multiple different policies. So for the Hispanic populations that are here, if they're not here as a citizen, like, we need to create a pathway to citizenship, because they're not going to go anywhere. Like, there's millions.
Nor do we want them to.
No, exactly. Like, there's no reason to, like, for Trump to be saying, like, hey, they're taking all their jobs, because first of all, we know that's automation and not immigrants. Second of all, they're, in our communities, they're members of our communities. We're not going to deport millions of people. So we need to give them a pathway to citizenship. Once we give them a pathway to citizenship, then the UBI conversation is a lot different, because you're talking about citizens versus people that aren't citizens. And then on that topic, Yang always said that we still need a strong border. You know what I mean? Like, just because we're giving people pathway to citizenship doesn't mean we need a strong border. That's one of those things that for whatever reason, there's a dichotomy with politics, where one side's saying, hey, we don't need, like, any border policies, and the other saying we need a wall. And we're saying, hey, if we're going to be giving every citizen $1,000 a month, we might need some way to regulate what the traffic is at the borders, because otherwise everybody is just going to come here, and then the numbers aren't going to make as much sense.
Our last segment, there was a community in Yuma where border wall construction was being placed, and they were suing, they were trying to advocate for the border wall construction to be postponed, because they were worried that workers will go into an excluded community where the virus isn't there yet and give it to them, and they don't have the healthcare resources to have pretty much any cases of coronavirus, let alone a fluctuation in that area. So the border wall is like a very contentious issue where we are in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even saying that there needs to be a wall, like, just a fence command. You know what I mean? Like, the wall doesn't really even make sense. You know what I mean? Like, you could just cut a hole in the wall. Like, it's not even a wall.
I've heard some assessment of putting border walls in places to deter people from dangerous swaths of desert where people typically die from, and which that could be theoretically okay, but I feel like that's a different angle than most border wall proponents come at the problem of immigration, of not like helping these people, is more keeping them out.
Yeah, it's just one of those policies that's very what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's very
contentious.
Yeah, it's very contentious right now, to the point where it's kind of hard to have an educated discussion on it without
to move towards even safer ground. On your website, you supported a Medicare for all like system. Andrew ran into a problem with Sanders supporters for using the Medicare for all nomenclature without supporting the Bernie Sanders policy Medicare for all version. Did you run into trouble like that campaigning? And what is exactly your what you would like to see Medicare for all look like or materialize like?
So they're on the right path. Again, I wasn't aware that it was like, they acted like it was trademarked. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't aware that it was using that term specifically tied it to Bernie, but that's a different discussion. But it goes to, like, we're not asking for, we don't need free healthcare. Like, we're just asking for very affordable healthcare. You know what I mean? Like, it's similar to the conversation of free college. Like, we're not asking for completely free college. We just want it to be affordable and relevant. So my view on healthcare is that the administration costs are just way too high. the cost to people in the richest country in the history of the world just doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of aspects where if you move towards a plan, like first off, Medicare for all in the way that Bernie's pitching it isn't something that would be, it would take like at least 4 years to implement it. If you look at Barack Obama with what he did with healthcare, it still took him a few years with the Senate and the House on his side. So it would have to move to a system where there's an option, right? So similar to the
Australia,
post office.
something like that.
Yeah. The analogy I try to use is similar to like the post office and FedEx. Like if you want the premium, a more expensive, service in terms of healthcare, you can go with the expensive kind. FedEx. If you want just the basic coverage, you don't want to spend a ton of money on it, you take the post office route, where you have the government option, and that's something, the public option, which we take that route and make a difference, get people the coverage they need, and then once we take that step, then maybe move it towards the direction where it's a Medicare for all. But the issue that I feel like a lot of progressives are running into is where they're trying to go for this all or nothing approach, and they end up just not getting anything done. And that's very, I don't know, it's not good for the people that are actually suffering.
That is a general problem with progressive ideology in general, that their belief that the government is the tool we should use to implement the social change, which arguably is true in some cases. Healthcare is probably the best example where you do need some government intervention. But then you run into situations like the social safety net, where maybe the government commandeering these institutions isn't the best way. Maybe giving money to people directly is better than the government telling them how they should be spending it. Do you think that's a fair kind of difference between maybe how we kind of think of how people should be helped and how generally the progressive movement has been approaching?
Yeah, because think about it. If you implement a universal basic income, you get people a steady flow of money coming to them. Then a lot of the problems aren't as dire as they were previously, right? So if you're trying to solve the Medicare issues first before UBI, then yeah, it's going to seem like it's almost impossible to do. But if you implement a UBI and give people money to actually deal with a lot of these issues, then it's not as serious, and you can make changes to the healthcare system that make sense for people when there's a universal basic income, right? And that's why I feel like Yang so, like we're so passionate about UBI, because it would help so many of the other problems and policies that people are trying to get past. And we're literally just like, just take a look at it, because we know for a fact, if you guys actually looked at universal basic income and the numbers and how much of an impact it would have, you wouldn't be pushing back on it so much. So all we're asking is, hey, look into it, because it will literally solve a good portion of these problems you're talking about. And then from there, we can work on what problems remain.
Well, that, in terms of us growing, I think what you just said is an essential challenge we have. Is the data enough to convince a large amount of people? Are we going to face a similar problem Sanders did, as his ideology maxed out at 30% of the people? Will we face a hurdle like that? Or do you generally think, if any rational person looking at the numbers and having a respectable person that's trying to earnestly talk and explain this to you, do you think that will be enough, or do you think we need to have something else to get it beyond that threshold?
I think before the COVID crisis, it would have been a lot more difficult to do versus now. Because now you're looking at people that got a stimulus check from the government to help them pay bills. So
with the president's name on it.
Yeah, we're literally saying like, okay, take that, make it monthly, because a lot of these jobs aren't going to come back. A lot of the parts of the economy are dead. And to move forward, yes, we need an emergency UBI that's a little higher a month. And then as the crisis goes away, then it steps down to a permanent UBI. So for example, if it starts off at the $2,000 a month, people are getting that money, and then as the crisis goes away, it'll gradually step down to $1,000 a month, and the $1,000 a month will be a permanent UBI. And I think for this crisis, it makes a lot more sense to people because people actually got the money. They realize how much it helped, and then they'll realize, like, if we got this every month, how much easier it would be to just take part in the economy. Because again, it's not supposed to replace your entire income. It's just supposed to, be a foundation. And what we're telling people is people need capital to participate in capitalism. Like, people
Yes.
aren't born into the system by choice. We have this as our system. So if people are born into this kind of a system, not by any choice of theirs, they're born into it, then we will give them a little support so that they can at least participate in the system. Because if everything's going to be based off money, people need money, period. And we're seeing that right now more than ever, where I can't imagine, like, I haven't seen any numbers of how many people didn't pay rent this month.
I
in
don't
May.
think they've been released. I don't think they'll
But
release those.
yeah, like, it has to be staggering, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's going on a couple months, and the economy is not coming back anytime soon. I don't care how soon they open everything back up. If people don't have money in their hands, if there's no consumers out there spending money buying these goods and services, then the economy is going to keep sliding down the steep hill. So what we're literally saying is, hey, it will help the people out. It'll help local economies out. And it's just the best way moving forward to get money into the economy. Because in 2008, they gave banks $4 trillion and it didn't do anything. Like,
Yeah,
the banks.
that's nothing to what they just did.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, they're going to spend the money anyway. Do you want the money to go to corporations that have billions and billions of dollars to try to help them out? Or do you want it to go to the people, which will help people and also indirectly help those corporations that are actually providing relevant goods and services? Like, if the companies aren't going to, if that money's not finding their way back to the companies, then the company might need to reevaluate exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, that's well put. One of the major problems of the last round of stimulus checks that you mentioned was that college students in particular got very little aid in how they were in the means testing they did to exclude people like 17 to 18 and people that are still dependents on their parents and stuff like that. What would you advise graduating people and people going into college on what to do in a landscape that's probably been most hostile since 2008?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, the younger generations have not had it easy. Like, I graduated in 2007 from high school.
Yeah, that's not that easy.
The economic crisis, the first one, is 2008. We were barely crawling out of that, and then this happened. You know what I mean? So like, I completely feel the younger generations. I would say that, first off, I mean, we need more people involved in these conversations as a whole. We can't. The big issue with why a lot of these policies don't favor younger people is because younger people don't participate in politics. So the politicians, they're not really worried about getting their vote, so they're not really helping you out.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, I was
bad.
disappointed, even though I was a Yang supporter, not Sanders supporter. It was disappointing to see how low voter turnout was in our generation for the primaries.
Yeah, and I completely understand it. Like, you feel like the system isn't there for you. You don't think it has any possibility of actually helping you. It's there. It seems as more of a burden. So you're just not going to participate, which it's completely understandable. But the way we turn that around is by getting massive amounts of people on board and actually participating in the conversation. Because, like, we can make impacts now. Like, with what the amount of people we have, we can make impacts. But imagine how much of an impact we'd be able to make if we 10x'd the number of people we have on board,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's kind of
That's the goal.
yeah, exactly. That's the direction where we want to go, and I think it is going in that direction. Unfortunately, it took a crisis like this to be moving in that direction, but it's just going to keep getting worse because everything Andrew Yang was talking about was, to do with automation. You're not dealing with a pandemic
Mhm.
that creates 10 years of change in 10 weeks. So we need to develop more strategies to get our messaging out to more people. Like, hey, there are massive problems in our systems, but there are ways that we can make it work for everyone. Because I genuinely feel that most people in the younger generations just don't think that there's anything we can do with politics. It's too corrupt, it's too fixed, it's too rigged, that it's not going to work for us. And it's literally, the older generations are not giving up the reins, they're not passing down the torch. And people literally told me, like, the older generations are going to pass the torch, you have to take it from them. So that's where we are right now, and we need
Mhm.
more people on board to take the torch, because it's not happening otherwise.
And this isn't even limited to uh, governmental leaders. Uh, ASU recently decided to go ahead and advertise the fact that they will be having in-person classes alongside U of A, U Arizona, and NAU during the fall semester. And I have a kind of a pessimistic take that they didn't really elaborate a lot on why they thought the pandemic wouldn't be severe enough in August to welcome students back on campus. So I think they're just trying to get people to re-enroll or decide to go to ASU or U of A, and then pull the rug out from under them after their checks clear. Do you think this will be a problem for universities with them facing such sharp declines in profits, or do you think that we can generally get back to the way things were in August?
No, it's going to be, I mean, if you look at, I think, and again, Ray can fact check this. I think
There you
the
go, Ray.
quickest,
First job.
yep, yep, got you, Ray. The fastest vaccine ever developed was 4 years, from what I'm reading. Again, you can double check that. So, and I only really see a solution in the form of a vaccine. Anything besides that is, it's not anything substantial. So, the universities are accustomed to getting these massive, massive, massive student loans directly to them. All their system, like, they're probably spending all their money they're getting because it's been so consistent. So the only, like, to me, the only reason they'd open back up is just like you said, so that they can get that money, and then once they get the money, then you figure it out from there. But if they don't have the infrastructure built out to take as many students online as if they did online and in person, then they're going to open up the school just so they can get a similar enrollment number so they can get that money. It's unfortunate, and that's one other reason why we need to be able to make a bigger impact, because there's many, many situations just like what you talked about where it's complete BS. It shouldn't be like that, but for whatever reason, corporations, schools, hospitals are allowed to function in a way where they're putting profits before quality and people, which is crazy.
It especially is. Another piece of news that caught my eye this week, coming from the Pioneer Institute of Public Policy Research, is that there's been a historic drop in national reading and math scores since the adoption of Common Core in our schooling systems, and it just shows how brittle our education system is throughout systematically from early education to high school to college. What can we do about? I know each of these issues require specialized responses, but what can we do to kind of stem the tide of our degrading educational systems?
I think, I mean, the first thing, like you kind of alluded to, is have people that are actually from the educational field in charge of education is a big thing. The people in charge of education right now are not from the educational field, and it shows. And I think it the goal, the ends justify the means. So I think the goal of Common Core is to have people do well on standardized tests. That's definitely how it was when I was going through public school. It wasn't, hey, are you actually learning? Are you grasping what we're talking about? Are you learning something that is relevant to your life and that you'll be able to take it, and be productive in the future. It was, okay, this is what's going to be on the standardized tests. So we're going to study only those things throughout the year because my incentive as a teacher is the higher you test on the standardized test, the better it is for me. So I think it's just a goal of incentives. Like if we don't tie, teachers' performance reviews to standardized tests, if we actually make education relevant, we should have more programs in school that lead to certain careers, right? Like there's very, very little in our public school system, at least where I grew up in Southern California, where they kind of groomed you for a specific path after school. It was just like, okay, you're done. Have fun. Good luck. Like to the point where they don't even teach you about like credit and credit scores and very basic financial things where a lot of people just fall on their face. So I think education, first of all, I mean, I feel like kids go to school way too much. Like I feel like they go way too early. Like I was like in junior high, I decided that most of what I did in school was BS. And unfortunately, I didn't take it super seriously. Like I still got a decent GPA, but I learned how to take tests really well and do things well that they cared about, and everything else they didn't really care about. So I feel like it just has to be more relevant to, hey, are we actually educating people in a way that will add value to their lives later? Are we, I don't know, personally, like I'm more the technology side where I think it should be mostly remote. Like the technology, I don't know why we aren't having kids go to a physical school a couple days a week and then do the rest of it at home. Like I don't, you know what I mean? But that's just me. So
that could definitely be a solution. One part of the solution. Having taken courses right now and for the last couple years online, there is definitive benefits in terms of flexibility, in terms of time management, teaches you responsibility, which would be great for younger kids to learn how to do. But it does take a toll on the social aspect of education and how we interact with people. Do you think that's would be a concern in this future world, or?
Yeah, and that's again, I'm not from education, so I'm
Yeah.
probably not the best person to give ideas about it. I just feel like I could have achieved a lot, like just as much, if not more, as what I did throughout school. And I'm talking about specifically like up to college, and even because even during college I did most of it online. Like I could do so much more in a short amount of time if I had the freedom of doing it remotely, and I'm not tied to sitting in a class from 7 a.m. till like 3 p.m. You know what I mean? Like, and same thing for colleges. Like colleges should have that option. They shouldn't be incentivized to have students risk their lives coming onto a campus just so they can utilize campuses and make more money, while putting people at risk. Like it just doesn't make sense to me.
That was a great conversation, a little bit about policy, but I do want to get your pick your brain about the political process of you running for office and how you thought the Humanity First banner kind of interacted with the current political landscape. So can you just frontline and tell a little bit of people about your run?
Yes. So again, I heard about Andrew Yang. I got really into the Yang Gang about June or July of 2019. A couple months after that, there was a death in the family, so I moved back to California. When I moved back to California, I saw that the current incumbent wasn't running again, and I wasn't really excited about the other candidates, so I decided to run for Congress. I did it largely because I felt like nobody was talking about the Humanity First platform first. Also, as to try to help other people get on the ballot and run for office without as much pain. Like I literally, from the point of when I decided, it was like, I think it was October 21st. So I was already late in the game. I was literally Googling how to run for office. And that's something where if someone's super excited about running and then they have to try to figure out how to get on the ballot, like that could kill your momentum right away. So it's something where I learned how to get on the ballot. In California, it took a decent amount of paperwork as well as a $1,700 filing fee. So anybody thinking about running for office, my first recommendation is to start early, because you can start raising money a couple of years in advance, and then you can use
James
you can
Ellars,
start now.
2022.
Nah. See, people ask me about that. I'm like, I'm trying to. I want to. I missed out on a lot in terms of like even the Yang
out on the
campaign.
fun.
You know what I mean? Like I'm like, damn it, I should have. Like I want to make sure if he runs again, I want to make sure that I can like help out where needed. But
I'm sure you've given. I just wanted to give people a little bit of taste of what Yang Week was like in Iowa and what the campaign was like, because I had the opportunity to go there, and it was a great experience. The camaraderie the Yang Gang felt with each other was almost instantaneous with everyone you met. We were treated very, very well when we were staying there. I remember talking to some Warren supporters, and they were roughing it at the campaign office, sleeping on the floor and stuff like that, while they had us in a hotel that was very economical, and they always had something for us to do. So it's tragic that you're able to miss out on that. It was one of the best times of the campaign.
That's what I keep hearing. No, I mean, and it's again, we made a lot of an impact running for office. Like, don't get me wrong. Like running for Congress, especially, like is a pretty big position, and you get a lot of press time and things like that, and a platform. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. For the policies, so I don't have any regrets there. Next time around, if Andrew runs in 2024, like I want to be, and that's one reason why we're building this other organization, Forward United, is just like we want to have as many resources as we can going into it, so that again, if we're just like, okay, like we need digital billboards here, we need a call-in texting campaign here, like I want to be able to, because the campaign will be doing things themselves, obviously, but any kind of backup we could provide, I want to be able to do that, and I don't want my own thing to take away from it. I'm 31. I have plenty of time to run for office right now. Like we need to get UBI passed. We need to get these policies passed, and we need to get Andrew Yang in office if he's willing to. If he's, and this is the other thing too, is like Andrew Yang has been carrying the load on his back, like for most of the way. You know what I mean? Like if he came out in the next couple months was just like, listen, guys, I need to take some time with my family. Like I think we got a lot done. Like I'm good for a while. Like I don't want to have to put the entire weight on his shoulders. Is what I'm trying to say. Like if you want to do that, like have the freedom to do whatever you want. Like rest. You brought it 80% of the way. We could take it the other 20. Obviously, I want him to run for office again. I want him to be president, but I don't want to put so much pressure on him, on one person, when there's other people that can be handling the load, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. I will say, from everything that I've heard Andrew say, he's pretty much running in 2024. Now, 3 years is a long time, and circumstances may change. I wanted to be open to maybe other candidates or better candidates in the political landscape in the next 3 years to be running under our banner. But I do think, at least here in Arizona, we're operating under the assumption that Andrew will be running in 2024. So we'll be kicking in high gear as soon as we can.
Yeah, hell yeah. I fully expect him to as well. But again, moving forward, like I want to take as much of the load off him as possible and put, because I feel like Yang Gang is super strong, like, and we can carry some weight, especially if we keep building it out between now and then. So I'm excited, the momentum we're gaining, and again, it's a super crucial time right now with everything going on, and I think we can do enough to get these things passed.
So you got an endorsement from the basic income movement during your run. What was the process of endorsements like, and what did that endorsement mean to you and your campaign?
Yeah, so the endorsement process back then, a lot of these organizations were still getting up and running. The basic
Mhm.
income movement, I worked a lot with Dylan and I did a decent amount with them just throughout the entire campaign. And when it came time ahead of um, my actual election on March 3rd, had a couple meetings with them, had a couple calls, and they endorsed me. I think it was a week or two before the actual election. They also endorsed David Kim, which did
Mhm.
better than me. David Kim's doing awesome down there. Um, so yeah, that's one of the things where I'm just like, damn, that's awesome what they're doing as an organization. And again, like not I don't want to force these different people and organizations to carry the full load, and I
Mhm.
want to do what I can moving forward to make an impact like these other groups are doing.
Yeah, no, that definitely we need institutions to be endorsing people and showing that we have their support behind these candidates. Humanity Forward did just endorse David Kim and Heidi Browns on Friday, I believe it was. And one of the main directors, Andrew, told us is support these candidates. But that begs the question: how do you get people to support these candidates that these candidates don't represent? So, how would you convince an Arizonan to phone bank to for David Kim or someone like that?
I would say if you're a person that supports the policies that another candidate supports, again, one of the biggest things with getting UBI, for example, passed on a national scale is to have widespread support on local levels, and especially with people that are running for office for Congress, right? Like if you want UBI passed on a national level in Arizona, then and if you have the opportunity to support a member that's running for Congress, even in a different area that still supports UBI, that if they get in office, that will absolutely positively impact the likelihood of you getting UBI in Arizona, even if they're in Oregon or in LA, because their votes are for national policies. So, and I don't know if you've heard or talked to either of them, but they're both delightful, and they both
I
need
haven't
as
had the
much
privilege
support.
yet.
Yeah, no, they're both super awesome. Like I did a forum side by side with David where people were asking questions and David and I were taking turns answering the questions, and I felt completely inadequate going after him every time just because he's so well spoken. Like he's a lawyer, he's so well spoken. I was like, I think I did decent, but
I'm sure
like
you
the,
did great, James.
yeah, I know thing,
That's your
but
people.
I know. But like they're both really really good candidates, and there's a lot of good candidates out there, and that's another thing. Like
Now,
a little help goes a long way. Like if you're running a campaign, especially grassroots campaign where you're doing most of the work yourself, like to have any kind of support from anyone out there is huge.
for any candidates that may be listening right now, the Humanity Forward is still going over their candidate endorsement process. So if you were, if that may still be coming in your future, is there any candidate that's been yet to be receive a shout out or endorsement from Humanity Forward that you'd really like to see them get an endorsement?
Um, I don't know if did they officially endorse Jonathan Herzog yet. I don't know if
Nothing that I've seen. That'd be news to me.
so. That'd be one. I
Ray,
know
you can
he's
look
in.
that up if Ray's here.
um, so that's one. I mean, there's a couple. The Kentucky one's interesting because there's two UBI candidates running for Senate there. So you have
Yeah, that is
Charles
interesting.
Booker and then you have
Michael.
Boyer.
Yeah,
So that one's interesting because I like both of them, but I don't know how they would decide which one to endorse. Which that I don't know. It goes back to the entire planning, running for office, looking at who else is running. Because if we have multiple UBI candidates running in the same race, it kind of makes it difficult for us to put all our resources behind one. Um, Not criticizing either of them. I'm just saying, moving forward, if
yeah,
you're thinking about running for office, like look at that. I think
that
Jonathan
would
Herzog.
be a problem. Here you go, Ray.
And on that, it looks like Jonathan Herzog has not been formally endorsed yet.
Okay.
You hear that, Andrew? James Ellars wants you to endorse Jonathan Herzog. Yeah. Speaking of the Yang Speaks Saves Democracy piece, That they won their settlement or won their case. What was it? Just yesterday?
Yep, yesterday.
What? So what? Are you privy to any of the behind the scenes information? That kind of took me by surprise.
Not really the behind the scenes information. I was surprised that it got resolved so quickly.
That was
because didn't he file the lawsuit like last week or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't have any insider information, unfortunately, on that. But I mean, it's another thing that gives Andrew Yang legitimacy. I mean, especially among the progressives and the Bernie people, like, hey, we're trying to work towards similar goals, and for whatever y'all don't want to get your hands dirty with, like, we will. Like, and super huge shout out to Andrew Yang for doing that. When I saw that he was filing that lawsuit, like, that was huge. So
yeah, shout out to all of them involved. And I know some of the Bernie people came to help with the lawsuit as well. So thank you for working with us. I do think we need to choose our next audience per se, strategically, when we're like, who are we going to outreach towards next? Do we want to align ourselves solely with the progressives? Do we want to return to our support in the Republican Trump supporter base? So if you were at the helm, what audience would be our priority?
That is a good question, because ideally, if you look at UBI and the support that Andrew Yang got, if you look at, we actually got, again, I'm just thinking of this in real time, we actually got a good amount of Republicans and Trump supporters. Yeah, like we're for Yang, and that's a huge demographic. And I don't personally, I don't think we should, I think we should have messaging and content and these different things for all different groups. Like, if you're someone from a red state or red area that UBI and Andrew Yang resonates with you, create content as to why it resonates with you. Like, bring us in, we'll talk to you, ask, we'll have these discussions, because even if you're creating content that resonates with just a few people, like, that's hugely impactful. So I'd like to see where that would go with people that are more conservatives, libertarian, because again, it's if you look at UBI, that's like, it would be one of the biggest tax returns to the middle class in history, and that's something that conservatives love. I think with the Bernie side and the progressives, I think it's getting there. I think they're still kind of raw with Bernie dropping out. Yeah, and Biden endorsement. I think that needs some more time, because I think they're still trying to game plan how to get Bernie in the race. You know what I mean? Like, I think they're still working
like 2 months ago, a month ago.
Exactly. So if they're working through their stages of grief. So I think that'll take some time too. So I think right now we continue to develop our organizations, develop our content. Thank you for what you guys are doing. That way, when these different groups start to look at it, they'll have access to different content that will be able to give them a better look at the situation as a whole.
Yeah, we're approaching the hour mark. I do have a few more things I wanted to ask you. Here's a fun thought experiment. So what does a Yang gang look under a Biden White House, and what does a Yang gang look like under a Trump White House? Because one of the two will win, unless he gets replaced. But
yeah, it's interesting, right? I think Biden, we still want to continue to influence policies. We still want to continue to build the base, even before the next election, because I really think there's a lot we can do in the meantime. Under Biden, I think it would be, I'm really curious who the hell his VP is, because that would decide a lot what, you know what I mean? Because the VP is going to be the one running the show. Like, Biden's already said that Biden literally just wants the title of president. like he wants to be president in his life, and then once he gets that title, he'll check out like a week later, is my opinion. So whoever he chooses for VP is going to be the big choice. So that piece is a little up in the air. I think we will be able to have the discussions about universal basic income, about a lot of these policies, data property rights, ranked choice voting. I mean, all these things with them a lot more openly. Trump, I feel like it'd be a lot more ramping up for 2024. It depends if Mitch McConnell magically becomes more open to new policies, which I really doubt. But again, it also depends on where this entire COVID crisis is going, right? Because there's so many different factors right now where we don't know what's going to be happening in like 6 months, let alone a year or two, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, I mean, we still need to develop what we're doing. We still need to be building. We still need to be talking to people and normalizing these terms like universal basic income, so that they are household terms, and Andrew Yang's going to be a household name.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we need to be able to act dynamically and just react like yesterday, like, hey, let's trend Yang saves democracy. And obviously not only with trends, but with policy as well. And that's a whole nother arm like I want to build out, is like a lobbying arm where we can actually make some impact. So right now, I'd say keep on moving the path we're moving, keep moving forward. When things come up, adjust, keep moving forward, and like I don't see very much getting in our way. Honestly, like I really think it's going to continue to grow, as long as we just keep on the path.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how much Andrew decides to be involved in this race, because he has committed to what's it called, campaigning for Biden.
Right.
But in this crisis, what does that look like?
Exactly.
Is he going to be more effective or more prominent because of our ability to handle online communications much better than Biden and arguably Trump? Or does he take a back seat and just let the two duke it out? What do you think he should do?
I think if he, again, unfortunately, the way politics is nowadays, you have to be kind of in with the establishment to a certain point. So I feel like he will do campaigning to a certain extent. Again, I don't see Biden doing in-person events, honestly. So it might just be more from home with propaganda, things like that. Like, I see them using the crisis, even if it got better, significantly better. I still don't see them putting out Biden, for the risk of him getting sick because he's almost 80, and also because of his mental state, because you don't know what in the holy hell he's going to say. So I think Biden's going to be doing more remote. I think Trump will be pretty much doing the same thing. So it's going to be interesting. Like, you're asking really good questions that I haven't really thought of, because this political race for the rest of 2020, this election, is going to be like unlike we've seen in like our lifetimes. If you're younger,
Yeah,
I don't know how they used to run back in the day, but now like I don't really know how it's going to play out.
It's interesting growing up with talking about the elections with my generation, because we grew up in 2016 election and now this one, which have been two of the most crazy primaries and election cycles since like America has seen in a long time.
Right.
I think this pandemic really works in Biden's favor, though, because the only faith I have in Biden is I do think that his cabinet and his administration would handle the crisis better, because it's in no one's interest to have this virus right now. So do you think you see the race evolving as a referendum around the coronavirus, or do you think these issues that we spent hours and hours debating during the primaries are going to become more prevalent at some point?
I think it will. The emphasis from the Democratic side will be on the preparation for the coronavirus, the poor handling of it rolling out, and even right now, the death toll hasn't flattened at all. But you're opening states back up because you want the economy to get back running. Like, the logic behind it doesn't make sense. And in the coming months, people are going to die due to actions of wanting to reopen the economy. So you're talking about like supporters on each side, like are going to have people in their family, friends close to them that are going to die due to just poor handling of what's going on right now. And that needs to be in the conversation of the election, because it like something like this could very well happen again in a couple of years. And who do you want at the helm if something like this happens again? Do you want someone that's blaming other countries and saying that we don't really need masks and, you know, that we need to reopen for the sake of the economy? Like, no, we don't need to reopen. I'm not going to risk my life. I'm not going to risk my family's life to help the Dow Jones up. Like, I'm just not. And if we don't have leadership that is actually putting people first, then like, what are we doing? So I agree that Biden, I think he and his cabinet would handle it better. I think that definitely needs to be part of the conversation, because we're at the point right now where I posted this yesterday, like economies can be revived, like dead people can't. Like we're at the point where yeah, like I don't know why we're trying to reopen things just for the sake of profit, especially when so I read a story of this bar type place reopening in Georgia, and the guy said all weekend he had 2 customers. Like,
yeah, people won't snap back into place.
No, like first of all, people are fearful of health reasons. Second of all, people don't have as much money as they used to have anymore. So you want to reopen the economy without putting money back into the people's hands. Like the $1,200 stimulus you put out are already gone. Like it took at least a month to get out to people, and by then bills were piling up. So now those payments are gone, and you want to reopen the economy when nobody has capital to spend. Like, so again, from the stance of Yang, it's like, it seems like common sense, right? Like you should probably implement a UBI so that the economy can actually get going again. If you reopen it right now, it's not really going to do much. And I don't understand where people are missing that logic.
To kind of put myself in their mindset, because I do have, there's a lot of our supporters and a lot of my friends are pretty firmly on that side, as they just view it as a personal liberty that's being defranchised from them in a similar like field of thought of like it's kind of hard to explain why they feel so adamantly that their freedoms are being encroached upon. But they're like in Arizona, there's protests when Trump came here from his supporters about the quarantine DC was leveling. And even after the news of us coming back on the 8th, like salons coming back on the 8th and restaurants coming back on the 11th. So, sorry, I just kind of rambled on. I didn't have much of a point there.
No, I know what you're trying to say. So people are saying that it's encroaching on their rights and they have a right to go out and do whatever. But the half-assed kind of lockdown that we had is lasting 2 months because people are still going out. Like,
yes,
if we did a lockdown for 3 weeks, like an actual lockdown where people actually stayed home, the problem would mostly go away. But so the thing they're complaining about is not really a full lockdown anyways. Like, and I understand both sides. Like, I understand it. One of the big reasons is that we're not getting good information from anyone right now, especially the government. So of course we're going to be frustrated and we just want something to happen. Like, we want something to change. And I feel like a lot of people don't know exactly what that is because we're just not getting good information from anyone. So people are frustrated on both sides, and I completely understand that.
Now, the data I'm really interested in looking at more on the bright side of the pandemic is how much our environment will be healed because of our decreased interactions and our social distancing measures. Do you think it's possible that a quarantine like initiative could stem some of the tides of climate change? I don't believe you're a climate scientist. It might be a little out of your depth, but
no, I mean, it definitely does. If you look at the pollution levels in Southern California around LA, for example, they dropped drastically when the lockdown happened, which it's actually very encouraging because we didn't know if some of these things would need decades to be reduced. But apparently if we just do widespread shutdown for a couple of weeks at a time, it gets reduced fairly quickly. And it's very encouraging, honestly, and it's more of a reason that we need to continue moving towards things like electric cars and solar. And like for a living, for years I've sold solar. Like I have a solar
Mhm.
company where I help people
Gotcha.
install solar on their homes, and it's when you actually look at the numbers, like it's common sense. Like, hey, it'll save you money and you're generating your own electricity. Like things like that are
Mhm.
win-wins. Like we just need to be doing anyway. It doesn't need to be a partisan issue. Um, I don't really know who loses in the conversation of a better environment other than like the oil and gas companies. Besides that,
Well, the
like,
measures that need to be taken are quite dramatic, and that's kind of like when I have the like reacting to climate change debate with people. My big question is like, at what is all this going to cost us in terms of not just like financial costs, but say we move to nuclear energy to stem off our energy productions. Where do we put them? Like, would you like a nuclear reactor and you're in California's eighth? Would you convince people of doing that? Or like, is there going to be a huge solar farm in the middle of the desert that we have in Arizona that's going to ruin the wildlife that's living there? Or like, there's been crazy reports of like birds being fried from the reflections of these solar farms. So
so
like,
the bird one, have you seen the one at State Line in Nevada and California they're talking about?
I
That one's
think I
kind of that one's weird. That's kind of a weird setup anyways. They literally have, it's not even solar panels, just they have thousands of mirrors pointed at this tower and they reflect the sun at the tower to boil liquid in the tower. Like
hmm,
that's not even, I don't even know why you do that over solar panels anyway, cuz solar panels themselves, you just set them up and once they're up, they're relatively like they're low impact, but not super low impact, but compared to these other things.
mhm.
But I mean, if you I forget the exact size of it, but if you put um, solar panels smaller than the county I live in, like that number of solar panels, if you put it in some random part of like Nevada that's completely desolate, like there is a relatively small amount of solar panels that can power the entire country. Like these things aren't super complicated and they're moving the right direction. The issue is that um, like these corporations that will suffer from us moving to clean independent energy are putting so much BS propaganda on the other side
Mhm.
that people are deterred. Like it really wouldn't take a lot of solar panels and wind farms to actually power everything. And that's the piece that people just are missing because it's again it's being politicized from these corporations that can lobby an unlimited amount. And it's something where again I think it's when, not if, but when our generations take the torch, it's going to be something that's going to be automatic. Like, no, we need to move. Like, have you been in a Tesla? Like, why wouldn't you want to have a Tesla versus like
I
a
have
Honda?
not
Like,
been
I
in
don't.
a Tesla.
Oh my god! Next time, like, find whenever malls reopen, if there's a Tesla store. Um,
We'll go.
but there, no, if you like, there's no excuse for having a gas car over a Tesla. Like, they're just like the machine they used to test crushing the roof for safety, it
Mhm.
broke the machine. Like
Damn.
not only do they not use gas, but they're the safest cars ever built. Like the
Well, it's got to
argument
be.
for,
The battery is so combustible, right?
I mean, if you look at the dangers of having gasoline
Yeah, that's true.
being ignited in a car versus batteries sitting on the bottom, like the number of Teslas that um, defect are way lower than normal cars. And again, we're getting off topic, but again, it's just the conversation of like all these solutions are completely doable. Like we can absolutely move to a clean environment that actually works better for everyone. We can completely move to a economy that gives people a floor so that you can actually participate in the economy and not have depression or suicidal thoughts just because you feel like you're worthless because our value is measured in how much you own or how much money you have. Like there are so many solutions that we can implement, and the other side of implementing the solutions are so much better than the current problems we have right now. And it will get done, and that's
So
what we're working on right now.
this might lead to maybe the overarching question. I'm not sure if you know who this is, but Robert Reich, he was Secretary of Labor under Clinton, wrote this book called Systems and How It's Rigged, and his major premise was the right versus left dichotomy is kind of a fiction, and it's just the people versus the oligarchs. Do you kind of, having worked in politics, is that a fair critique? That it's just the rich first, and everyone else would pretty much get along if the rich weren't against the policies that we favor, or do you think the right versus left dichotomy is the main problem we should be focusing on?
No, it's all a smoke screen. Like the only reason
That's fair.
they have a two-party system is that they can blame each other for everything, not get anything done, and turn around and give themselves any and all benefits that are there, right? Why would members of Congress just think they're completely fine with selling a bunch of stock, after they're briefed on the coronavirus crisis?
That was just horrible.
And then,
was that?
yeah, and not expect any consequences. Like they're getting to the point where they're cocky about it. Like it's past the point of just corrupt. It's past the point where it's right or wrong. They're blatantly doing corrupt things in front of the public because they think they're untouchable. And the whole party system thing is complete BS. It's something where it makes it more difficult for normal people to run and win office. It's completely built for you have to either have money, be wealthy, or be part of the establishment to win. And that's one of the things we need to tear down because it is eroding everything else. It's making politics absolutely corrupt, that to the point where we can't get anything done. Like if you looked at what has been passed in the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Nothing positive. That we wanted.
No, that's positive. Like it's crazy. So back to the point of we need different people to take the torch. I have been told that the people that currently have the torch are not going to willingly give it up. So we're at the point where it has to be taken. Mm-hmm. So moving forward, we need to keep that in mind, because especially when it comes to the two-party system, it's complete BS. There's no reason. If it was an actual party system, there'd be 5 or 6 parties at least, with a bunch of sub-parties.
We'd have to completely change the way we vote if we wanted to. There's something called Drew Verger's law that just any first past the post system automatically produces a two-party system over time. It would require I think it might require a constitutional amendment changing us to a proportional representation system, which could be a monumental task.
I mean, if you look at the whole systems themselves, we're using systems that were created in the 17 and 1800s, and it's the 2000s. Why in the holy hell do we need representatives that go to Washington to vote on my part? Why can't I vote on my part from home? I don't need, this isn't times of horse and buggy where I need to have a representative go ride to Washington so that they could be my representative. No, there's so many systems that are completely outdated that people are just keeping in place so that they can maintain power. It doesn't make sense for any reason besides that.
Yep. I do like to caution people when they want to change. I basically tell them, first, your idea needs to be better. People need to agree that it's better than the original system. And the second thing I caution people is that anything you do, even positive, has negative ramifications somewhere along the lines. So when we're going forward, being conscious of this, how should we approach the wake we leave from advocating for UBI and advocating for our policies and joining the system that we want to kind of topple?
So I've talked to a lot of people, for example, UBI. So it's the first thing is really having these discussions okay, it would help a lot of people, but what would it actually damage? So if you look at, for example, like addicts, if you give $1,000 a month to people that are addicted to
Substance.
heroin and meth and things like that, then there's going to be a significant level of overdoses. So you have to set up things for aftercare where, these people can go, safe injection sites, aftercare, things like that. You have to set up these things in advance before certain things are implemented. The other thing with UBI is, okay, how do homeless people even get the UBI if they don't have bank accounts? And that goes back to the other policy of, okay, do you put a bank in every post office? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's interesting.
There's so many different things. And again, it's doable and there are ramifications of the policies you implement either way. But we need more people talking about it and creating plans and ideas and implementing these things. Which is, again, why I'm like trying to build this other organization, Forward United, because these are things we've talked about. Like, okay, UBI gets implemented. What are the negative things? And one of the big things that discussions have been around is like addicts and how do we prevent people from overdosing and having problems with that. And there's so many different levels, but I feel like if we're having these discussions and actually implementing them, then we can mitigate a lot of the negative aspects. And you won't stop all of the negative aspects. There are things that are just going to happen regardless. But I think we're a smart enough group that we could look at it multi-dimensionally and actually get a lot done on all levels.
I definitely agree. We're going to wrap it up here, James. I want to give you your plug. Where do you want people to go see, listen to you or hear you talk?
Yeah, I'd say the easiest place is Twitter. Everything's connected to Twitter, so it's just at Ellars, ELLARS. Forward United is also on Twitter. It's at FWD United. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Super great conversation. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited for what you guys are doing.
We appreciate it. Well, hopefully we can get you on again with some people with Forward United as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you need me, just let me know.
Great. Well, that was James Ellars, Humanity First candidate, California 8th. Sadly, he lost in his primary, but he's leading the way in our activism right now. This was the Step Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hendon. Please retweet, subscribe. Let the Yang Gang know if they want news about the Humanity Forward movement, Humanity Forward National, or Humanity Forward Arizona. This is the place to be. Anyone who wants help connecting to our movement, we have access to the proper channels. States that do not have Yang Gang chapters right now with the Humanity First movement, please reach out to us. They are actively looking for leaders in the states that we do not currently have. We'll get that list to you soon. Thank you, James. Thank you, Ray. You guys stay safe out there, all right?